Hello everyone and welcome back to the Mana Confluence, a juncture for all things magic. Today I do sound sick, which is because I am sick, but let's get into it. Every standard set since Kaladesh has brought with it a batch of Planeswalkers that most players ignore. The Planeswalker deck Planeswalkers are intentionally underpowered cards that for the most part never see play outside of new players in their beginning decks. But can these Planeswalkers be playable? And if they are, where should we play them? Let's get into it. The way this is going to work is that we will look at every single walker, all 34, and grade them out of 5 for power, look at the pros and cons briefly, and then finally we will see what decks we should play them in. In the description below will be the timestamps for each one of the Planeswalkers so that you can find your favorite. First off, we have Ajani, Inspiring Leader. This card actually seems pretty powerful because of its consistent life gain accompanied by the removal the card brings to the table. It unfortunately struggles without help from other creatures, but the fact that it has removal attached to it does earn it a solid 2 out of 5 on the scale. The ultimate is largely irrelevant, but a 1 will be less powerful and a 4 will be a lot more powerful, more like a traditional mythic level Planeswalker card that you would get out of the booster pack, which this is not. However, this is completely playable, and I even featured it in my 1v1 Brawl deck tech for the new Heliod. This slots in well to a life gain build, and the removal makes it much more versatile. Second up is Ajani, Valiant Protector. The plethora of +1s is valuable, but the +1 that goes and fetches a creature is very good. The ultimate could be good in a life gain deck, and this card I did feature in my first ever video, so clearly it's somewhat playable. I would give this walker a 2.5 for being completely fair but not underpowered. The +1 is valuable, but there's a certain broken factor to Planeswalkers that is almost always seen in the Mythic Booster Pack Planeswalkers, but unfortunately not present here. The +2 is also valuable, but it won't make a game, especially in Commander where this is going to be mostly played. The +1 does become better in Super Friends where it's essentially a tutor for a creature, but it does expose your deck. Proliferate is additionally very impressive with this card, so I think it has very good synergy in the deck, but not necessarily raw power. Our third Ajani on the list is Ajani Wise Counselor, and may I ask, what the heck happened with this card? Unlike some others on the list, I'm going to be honest and say I have not played this card, but it seems extraordinarily good. The +1 is incredible with other creatures, which is why this is a Planeswalker deck card, but Ajani by no means saves you. What he does do is finish a game, and he does that very well. He gains life, he boosts your team, and the life gain boosts his score to a solid 3 out of 5. He lacks token generation or removal. However, what he does do, as I said before, is synergize and finish so well that I would play with any deck that goes wide or wants to gain life. And that is a very doable ultimate, may I say. Our first non-Ajani Planeswalker is Angrath, Minotaur Pirate, and I wish he could be better. If you're playing Pirate Tribal, I'm sure you could use the help. If Torbran is a big part of your deck, then okay, that makes the +1 good. But besides that pretty crazy ultimate, 6 mana is just not okay, and maybe it's playable with Doubling Season. But if you can afford Doubling Season, then you probably won't be playing Angrath as a first choice. You could buy a better Planeswalker. This card deserves a 1.5 in my eyes for being hardly better than an uncommon walker. Next up is Ashiok, Sculptor of Fears, and it's incredibly interesting because it's really only going to be played in Mill deck, but Mill honestly needs the help, and that's coming from a guy who is a Mill player. The loyalty is too low for 6 mana, but he can bring on creatures with that great -5. I just think 6 mana is way too much, and the card draw and uniqueness of the card is the only thing keeping the rating up to a 2 out of 5. Moving on, we have Chandra, Bold Pyromancer. Is the Planeswalker that interests me the most because of its potential to actually go infinite. If you get Cloudstone Curio, a random Planeswalker, and Planebound Accomplice. Basically, these are cards that allow you to infinitely cycle through Chandra and activate her enough that you will just get infinite red mana and do infinite damage to your opponents. Besides this, the +1 is ramp and helps to justify the high CMC. Once again, this card does thrive with Torbran. The final justification for this card's rating is going to be based off of the potential to go infinite, which will boost the score to a 3 out of 5 in playability. Next up is Chandra, Flame's Fury. It's pretty simple to review. The +1 is potential removal, the -2 is actually pretty good. But 6 mana? Come on! That's not very doable, and it's just far too expensive. I don't see this being played very commonly with any theme. I give this Planeswalker an unimportant 1.5 out of 5. And for that matter, Chandra Pyrogenius will just automatically get a 1 for being a worse version of the same card. I know I said it in an accent, mate. Domri, City Smasher, is going to have to work really hard just to get a 2. It's sort of a carbon copy of the Chandras, except it gives a boost to all of our creatures and haste to our creatures, which is better. I could see this being played theoretically in a typical Gruul deck, but only in Commander due to the 6 mana. However, I would give this a generous 2 out of 5, because I feel like you can do some broken stuff with haste. Dovin, Architect of Law, is pretty groovy. The -1 is consistent and reliable, while the +1 is not only great card advantage, but also life gain, which is valuable. What sets this apart from other walkers like Chandra is its ultimate actually being valuable, and the -1 can hit every creature without some sort of hexproof. I'll give this one a slightly above average 3, due to the ability it has to slot into Super Friends, Control, or even Life Gain. To be honest, I did have to come back to this one after playing this card for the first time, because it actually works well in my Niv deck, which surprised me. On paper, this thing did not seem as powerful, but that -1 was really able to take over the game. Next up is our girl, Elspeth, Undaunted Hero. It's another card on our journey to the restoration of white. This year is going to be about seeing if white can get more powerful for the mana confluence, and I'm not sure this is a step we really needed. The +1 is actually okay because of the boost it grants, but the best ability may be the -2 because it's like creating a token. But the card it gets isn't even good. To be real, the ultimate is the most worthwhile of all of them because of its ability to win, but for 3 white mana in the cost, it's not great, so a 2 out of 5 is what we'll give this card. Up next is Gideon. Martial Paragon is not going to see play because of its ultimate. The ultimate is actually pretty relevant. Nor is it going to see play because of the 0 mana ability, unless you're talking about a Super Friends deck where that might actually make this card playable. What really is going to make this see play is that +2. It's good in a token deck, and it can untap things, so it can convoke. But the shenanigans we can pull with that plus ability is actually pretty fun and impressive. And I personally believe that the potential for broken things with this card is high, so I'll give it a 3 out of 5. Additionally, this is one of the few walkers that 5 mana for 5 loyalty is not amazing, but it doesn't seem like a ripoff. I feel like we're actually going somewhere with this Planeswalker once it's 5 mana rather than 6 mana. Gideon the Oathsworn is a Planeswalker deck walker with a static ability. The static ability is actually very good with token decks or +1/+1 counter synergies, as it boosts the entire team in an alpha strike, and this card seems good in 1v1 brawl. Think about it like this: if Gideon's on the battlefield and you attack someone with all of your creatures are going to get +1/+1, because whenever you attack with 2 or more non-Gideon creatures, you get a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. Meaning if I attack with 10 creatures, I get a +1/+1 counter on each of those creatures. Besides that, Gideon himself can attack, which can be risky, but also good. The ultimate, however, is most likely the best move here, as it saves us at the price of Gideon himself. However, the lack of token production method only warrants Gideon a 2.5. Hualti, Dinosaur Knight, is a good Planeswalker only if you are playing Dinosaur Tribal, and even then, it isn't that amazing. The plus will have a decent effect, and then the ultimate may theoretically have an impact in Commander, but the best ability is the -3, and even that is too many loyalty counters to lose. Honestly, this card doesn't really impress me, and I could only see it being run in dinosaur builds where you need more cards. And maybe then it could do work, but I'm not really confident that it will. As far as raw power goes, I have to stick this one with a 1 out of 5. Jace, Arcane Strategist, wants to be good so bad, but unfortunately it just isn't here. The static ability would be great with Mind-Mage, but the synergy actually doesn't work because we've already drawn the second card each turn because it's getting the counter, but nonetheless, it's an interesting interaction there. The +1 is really good, but we've already seen better from other Planeswalkers. The ultimate should end the game. That's a positive, but there's absolutely no guarantee that it will get there because it folds to a board wipe. Overall, I'd give this one a 1.5 out of 5, solely based on the card advantage. Jace, Ingenius Mind-Mage, is a better version of Jace, but still not quite what we want. The variety of +1s is very valuable and versatile. I've used this card very well with Voral, but for 6 mana I could have broken a lot of other cards. It does have the ability to ultimate when it first enters with Doubling Season. The untap ability for the versatility of the card will earn this a 2, just under average for a Planeswalker. Next on the list is Liliana, Death Wielder, and this card is all removal. For 7 mana, I wish this did more, but that ultimate is great. The +2 adds credit to this, but in raw power, I do not see it. The removal is good, and the synergy is very much present with a card like Kapatra. So Commander is probably where this will be played, and a 1.5 out of 5 is what Liliana will see because of its high converted mana cost. At 2 less mana is Liliana the Necromancer, which is a positive change. It's only 5 mana, and it has a -1, again, a positive change. And the -1 is really good. It gets its creatures back. The +1 actually breaks through a stalemate, and that's good. This is great with Doubling Season because the ultimate is the type that wins a game in the 1v1 format. I can see this synergizing with a commander as well, so this could definitely see play in a commander format. This seems more than fair, which is really surprising. I could actually sort of seeing a version of this getting printed in an actual set, and I'm somehow satisfied with giving this card out of 3.5 out of 5. I'm giving this a 3.5 out of 5 because the mana cost is fair and all of the abilities actually matter. That +1, it actually goes really well with Rakdos or another card like that. This just seems like a really relevant card at the moment. Mu Yangling, Celestial Wind, is more than interesting. It's extraordinarily interesting. The entire card is focused on making our opponents less valuable. The +1 is pretty good, but not incredible, where the -3 is great by bouncing creatures. The ultimate is so good, especially in a flying deck, because we can boost up birds! Yeah, I'm not going to stick this in my bird deck anyway, I'm going to give it a 2 because of its removal, but otherwise it just doesn't seem that impactful. Nicol Bolas the Deceiver is a very good finishing card for a game, and it has to be for this card to cost a whole 8 mana. I'm really loving the oppressive +1 for control builds, and I love the minus as card advantage and removal. Speaking of card advantage and removal, the ultimate completely refreshes our hand. This is, however, all for 8 mana, so I wouldn't expect this in any format but Commander in a discard build, draw build, or a Nicol Bolas tribal deck. I could also see this being run in a Super Friends deck, and because of that versatility, I'll stick this with a 2.5 out of 5. Next up is Nissa Genesis Mage, and boy, is it interesting. That +2 is a lot of value, and it better be because this thing costs 7 mana. This is right off the bat a clear commander card because of how good this thing can be at untapping good lands like Gaia's Cradle and valuable creatures like Vorul, so synergy is a huge upside of this card. The -3 is a cool and possibly valuable trigger. The -10 is a little too risky to be reliable, so I could see this in a ramp deck or a deck that's focused around creatures or planeswalkers. I would give this card an average 2.5 out of 5 because of how much mana I have to spend just to get this thing out. Nissa, Nature's Artisan, is from the original batch of Planeswalker decks, and boy does it show. This thing is very underpowered. Next up is Oko, the Trickster. I doubt this guy is going to break standard, but maybe he'll be playable in Commander. Starting with the +1, this seems actually good. It can put a +1 counter on stuff and boost counter themes, and those super friend decks like Atraxa that are meant to boost up creatures. The -0, or +0, or as some might call it, the 0 ability, is really good for a Planeswalker as this thing will just become another copy of a creature you control. This seems good in a Super Friends deck, especially if we can create tokens and then make them all 10/10s with the ultimate. This isn't great because, as I've been saying for every other Planeswalker, it costs too much mana, which I guess means that they're doing their job making these good for new players but not great for experienced players, but still, 2.5 out of 5. Next up we have Ral, Caller of Storms. Another instant of an uninteresting card because of too high of a mana cost. The -7 is great but not worth it for 6 mana. And the card advantage is the sole thing that makes this playable. For that reason I rate this card a 1 out of 5 because I don't see this shaping a game or changing a game at all. Rowan, Fearless Spark Mage, is yet another mono red planeswalker that's all about being aggressive, and that's the only place I'd ever see this card. The +1 is simply not good enough because it only rewards us if we already have creatures. It probably won't survive, so I give the scale a 1.5 out of 5 because of the first strike on the plus and the good ultimate. Next up is Sarkhan Dragon Soul, and it's probably the most synergistic planeswalker on this list. Besides being great with Torbran, Arcane has one of the best plus abilities I have ever seen. Okay, maybe not that good, but when you spend this much time staring at bad Planeswalkers, it messes with your head. To be real, this ability is actually pretty powerful. The -3 isn't completely amazing, but in clutch situations, it's possible Planeswalker removal. But oh lord, that ultimate is so incredibly strong, and I love it. I'd include this in any dragon deck that I made. For those reasons, I'll give this a solid 3 out of 5, only because dragons don't work in every deck. Next on the list of tribe-related cards is Sorin, Vampire Lord. Keep in mind that this vampire deck is very good, and it takes a lot for a new card to get added into the deck. Overall, this card is evidence that Hualti is doing a good job with this product, because this is a card that maybe sees play in a new EDH vampire build, but nowhere else, because it just costs too much mana, even with a solid -2. The ultimate isn't necessarily good if you don't have creatures, so this earns a 2 out of 5, just because vampires are relevant. Teferi, Timebender. 6 mana is a lot for this when we are already starting behind the place we want to be. Let's start with the +2 ability. This seems good because we can sort of protect our Planeswalkers and untapping an artifact. Like the Chain Veil could actually be very good in the Super Friends deck, but probably not good anywhere outside of Commander. The -3 seems solid, especially in Commander. The -9 is the only thing that might scare someone, which is because, well, it does give us an extra turn. Just one though. Overall, the ultimate brings this to an average 2.5 out of 5, and we only have Super Friends to thank for that one. Tezzeret, Cruel Machinist, is the next card on our list. That 6 mana cost deserves a better +1, because this one is slightly worse than Dovin's +1. The 0 loyalty and ultimate are okay, but truly not inspirational build-arounds. For those reasons, I'm going to give this card a lackluster 1 out of 5, for being completely underwhelming. Tezzeret Master of Metal is hopefully going to be better than this newer counterpart. Let's start off. This +1 is better than a straight card draw, because that card is almost guaranteed to be gas, or in the right deck it's a combo piece. Next up is the -3. Not good on its own, but with the right board state, it could possibly affect a game. Finally, the ultimate -8 is possible and definitely impactful on a board. I wouldn't feel bad putting this into an artifact brew, but given the fact that this is good with artifacts, and artifacts are very popular, I'll give it a 2 out of 5. Because remember, value is never a guarantee, most of the time. Moving on to one of the last 4 we're covering is Vivien of the Arcbow. I've been saying this all video, but 6 mana is the biggest limitation of these cards. That's good. They're supposed to be underpowered. At least this one has a +2, and it boosts up a creature. Good with Atraxa, good with +1/+1 counter synergies. Same old, same old. The -3 is removal, but unfortunately not guaranteed removal. The ultimate is good, but it won't end the game if Vivien is all you have left. So this card earns a 2 out of 5 only because it has a +2 and not a +1. Third from the last is the other Vivien. This one, Vivien Nature's Avenger. This one may seem familiar, but to me, it's so much better. The +1, yes, is not a +2, but +3 counters on something. 2 is substantial, but 3 is incredible. That can change combat math very quickly in our favor, and imagine what Vorl can do if this thing sticks. The -1 is also overall great value, and the ultimate will likely impact the game, if it even happens. Because this thing only comes in with 3 loyalty. That makes it so vulnerable in an era where anything can hit walkers. We'll have to be careful, but I think this card can really work. And the game-changing +1 combined with good and cheap -1 gives this card an average 2.5 out of 5 due to low loyalty. Vraska Regal of Worgen. What is this I see? A Planeswalker deck walker that isn't 6 mana? Oh, that's because it's 7 mana. Here's to hoping it's good. It enters the field with 5 loyalty, so decent protection. Speaking of protection, that -3 is pretty nice. Additionally, the +2 can make a decent attack, but it doesn't really help us survive. The ultimate should win a game, especially for 7 mana, so 1.5 out of 5 is what this is getting for relevant abilities at too much mana. I just don't feel like this does enough and has enough guaranteed value for the 7 mana we're paying for it. Compare it to the traditional 7 mana walkers we've been seeing. It's very different. Finally, we have Vraska Scheming Gorgon. As almost a cheaper copy of the last Vraska. The -3 does the same thing, and the ultimate is just a bit better at ending the game. The difference is upgrading a +1 counter to a 1 power boost among all of our creatures, which I believe will be more beneficial, and for 1 less mana means that this ability might actually be useful. The -3 alone will carry this card to a solid 2 out of 5. So that concludes this really long session of reviewing cards. I hope this has been of interest to you, and it would be great if you could please subscribe, and hey, why not drop in the comments and let me know what you thought of my rating and what your favorite Planeswalker deck walker is. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.